Oi! Headhunter! What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Headhunter Hideout. Happy Monday to everybody. I hope your week is starting off well. Super excited to be here today. I have Ron Gauthier with me, and he is the principal consultant at Hirewerx. He has been in the recruitment industry for the past long time. I don't want to get into it, but definitely a valuable resource here. So as a reminder, this is a live interactive show. What does that mean for you guys out there? It means if you've got questions for Ron or myself, type those into the comments. We will get to them. And then we're also sponsored by Huxo Media, and they are a global recruitment marketing company that helps recruiters build brands. So Ron, welcome to the show today. It is great to be here with you. How's everything in your world today?
Everything is good, man. It's still we're kind of coming out from under the deep freeze that Chicago had over the last few weeks. I never thought the snow was going to go away until a couple of days ago. We had in my front yard, I had almost 2 feet of snow, and so it was a little crazy. But the temperatures are going back up. We're capable of having winter weather until June here, so it's kind of one of those things where I'm ready for springtime. But things are good, man. It's good to see you. Thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome to have you. And I'm local to you as well, so I know the feeling when the
Kenosha, right?
Kenosha, yep. And I love seeing the sun come into. I've got like a little back section at my house where I read in the morning, and it's great to see the sun coming through. So feels good.
About time.
About time is right. So, hey man, I'd love to get into it. Usually, I like to just start the show with hearing a little bit about the guest story on like how you got into recruitment, and just running a little bit of background into how you got started in the industry. And obviously, there's a lot to how you got to where you are today. But I'd love to just kind of hear how what you're doing today ties into where you started. So how did you get started in the industry, and what did things look like?
By accident. That's the quickest answer. I got into this by accident. I had a whole set of other plans for myself, and I got a job. And as you said, I've been in it a long time, but this was back, I want to say, early 90s. And I got a job with a medical recruiting company. I was recruiting physicians. And it's a different kind of recruit because it's really, really super relationship based. It's not transactional at all. And the fees don't come quickly, particularly when you're recruiting certain types of doctors. The process is very long. And it taught me, that experience taught me that relationships mattered in every interaction that I had, whether that was with an IT person or whether that was with a CFO, whoever I was recruiting. That connection that I was going to have with them and that ability to develop trust with them was critical to anything that I've ever done. And I've been fortunate enough to have an interesting career. I've worked for the Department of Homeland Security. I've worked for consulting firms. I've been able to lead a couple of different consulting firms over the course of my career. And the one thing that has just stuck with me, and the one thing that I try to share with anybody that I work with is, you can automate, you can do a whole bunch of other things in your process. The one thing that machines can't do is tell a story. And they don't engender trust. People will share things with a machine that they may not share with a human being. If you have a bot that sits on top of your career site, they may share things with a bot that they might not share with a human being because of fear of judgment. But that bot is not going to be able to tell a story in the same way that you can. And to me, that ability to storytell, that ability to change the trajectory of someone's life by putting them on a different career path has always been, to me, one of the coolest things that you can do. Your show is titled The Headhunter or Headhunter, and that's just not a Headhunter Hideout. That's just not a term that originally was thought of very highly. People looked at that as almost a derogatory term, right? You're a headhunter.
I'd still say they probably do in some ways.
But see, I think that's wrong. I think a headhunter can be the most noble role, most noble job you could have, because you are a trusted advisor. If you do your job right, you're a trusted advisor for that person, and you are helping change whatever situation it is they want to change, whether that's a boss change, a career change, trajectory change, whatever it is, you can have a pretty significant impact on that. And I know it sounds crazy in today's day and age, but it's a very intimate relationship that you have with a candidate. When they really trust you, it goes beyond just being a recruiter. And to me, that's always been the neatest thing about this job. I don't know if that answered your question or not. I've been at it a long time. I've recruited a lot of different things and have seen the industry change. And now I'm in a place where I'd like to be able to share some of the lessons, that I've learned over time.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'd love to get into some of those changes too that you've seen over time.
Sure.
I guess, from when you started to where you are now, I guess what's been the biggest change that you've seen in the industry, and how has that impacted your day-to-day and how you recruit people, how you go after potential clients? Like what are some of those changes, and what are some of those shifts that you've seen? And it could be multiple changes as well over time.
Sure, I think it is. When I first started, email and things like that weren't prevalent. You knew about it, you knew it was out there, particularly if you were in what they referred to as data processing back then. You knew things like that were coming, but you didn't actively use them. And so that ability to remove friction from the process through software and through automation over time has made the job easier. It's also, I think, in some ways, made recruiters more reactionary in terms of how they deal with open roles, right? When I came up in the industry, you didn't get paid to necessarily, and I still think it's the case, you didn't get paid necessarily to fill a specific role. You got paid to have a relationship with a person who could fill that role when it became available. And today, what I think happens, if I look at it, we get an open rec and we want to run. And we want to be able to try to fill it as quickly as we can. And so we send out these messages that are aimed at having someone take the job that we have right now, rather than focusing them on, hey, what is of interest to you? What are the things that matter to you? That proactive recruiting that happens way in advance of a job coming to you. And that's true whether you're internal or external. I've done this throughout my entire career. Even when I recruit today, which isn't as much as I used to, my work is more advisory now. But when I'm recruiting or doing an executive search, I'm always building relationships with people who I think I might need to know 6 months or a year from now. And when you're bogged down and if you're at an agency on the outside and you've got a boss who's screaming at you, place a person, make a commission, or you're internal and you have all of this different you have all these different steps that you have to go through in order to get a person onboarded into your organization. That can seem like a daunting task. But there are plenty of tools out there. There are plenty of automation tools out there that allow you to make first-level connections that generate conversations for you. I think we use the technology that we have available to us sometimes in a backward way, right? We want to send out these multitudes of emails to get people interested in a particular role, rather than using it to be able to generate and foster relationships that I can then call on later on. To me, that's one of those things that it's kind of the art of recruiting that I don't think we do as well. And I've been guilty of that, as much as anybody.
Absolutely. And I see Kevin here as well. Are you connected with Kevin? Do you know Kevin?
I do not.
Well, definitely connect with Kevin. So,
Okay.
But he just said, I love that distinction, making your recruiting personalized to the person and not the persona. And I think I really like that too. And I like the approach, the long-term approach. But I think what happens so often is you get into a situation, especially if you're in the agency world, where it's all about the short term, and it's all about how much money can you generate in the short term. But in reality, what you're talking about, it's a long-term play. And I think it's balancing those actions. And within that too, like learning the industry you're in. I think it's, how do you become somebody that's a highly trained consultant and advisor? The only way you get there is if you understand the industries that you're serving. And if you're able to not only say, hey, I can find you 5 candidates to fill this role, but you can actually look at the role and maybe suggest a different type of person they should be looking at, or maybe address other needs within the business. And that's why you go from a recruiter that's filling seats to a consultant that's adding value and actually giving the owner, the hiring manager you're working with, a different view. So I'm curious too, like you're in an advisory role right now. Talk to us a little bit about that. Like what exactly are you doing, and what are some of those challenges that you're seeing with clients you're working with?
It's interesting because anybody who recruits knows this. Everybody hates us until they need us, and then the minute we fill a role, they no longer care for us anymore. We are the if you think about it from a business standpoint internally. HR has taken a long time to catch up with the rest of the C-suite. They're just now beginning to get a seat at the table, and part of that was because the rest of the C-suite was really data driven, right? They were really focused on data, and HR wasn't necessarily that way. The advent of people analytics and some of the people data that we collect now has changed. And I think as candidate preferences have changed, other C-suite leaders recognize that you have to have a good HR function that helps foster, it doesn't create, but it can help foster a culture that keeps high value talent in your organization. I think what's interesting when I talk to clients today is that there's a disconnect in terms of what it means to recruit. I have one client who is on fire, has to hire, and this is a pretty typical story. Has to hire, and when you tell them on the front end, the ramp time to go from zero, no pipeline, no nothing, to a hire, I generally tell people, if you're good in your industry, is 45 to 60 days to finish it, right? You actually bring somebody in and finish the deal. Clients don't hear that. So they think that there's this misconception that talent is just out there. And I think it might be true out there and available. And I think it might be true in some industries. But if you're working in tech, that's not the case. Tech goes fast. Those people have a job offer and they're gone. They have a job offer and they're gone. So your whatever process you build, internal or external, and what I tell people is it has to account for a few things. It has to have speed. There has to be pipeline velocity. Absolutely. It also has to make sure that it is focused on checking the boxes that need to happen internally. And so often, external recruiters and agencies have no idea what's going on internally. They're actually, in my opinion, competing values going on. External people want to move. Internal people want to slow things down because they want to make sure that they get the right hire. And so you end up creating this adversarial relationship where there doesn't need to be one, right? And I think if agency people would do anything to help, and internal people would do anything, it would be to teach what those disparate parts do. What does an agency person actually do? What are they good at? They are good at relationships. They are good at providing you a person quickly, right? In most cases, because they've spent time creating relationships. And conversely, external people have to understand all of the things that internal folks are up against in order to get somebody through that process. And so when I talk to an agency or I talk to a person or to a company, that's a big part of what we're talking about, is understanding who you're dealing with, understanding why they are the way they are. And I would counsel anybody in an agency to begin to think about the value that you really provide for, and this is going to upset some folks, but the value that you provide as an external person today is different than it was 20 years ago. What internal teams are bad at almost always is sourcing. That's the biggest weakness that they have because it's time consuming and it's laborious. And external teams are great at it because they're spending times on relationships and their whole job is around sourcing and learning people. And so external firms may have to revalue what they do and the service that they actually provide in order to help reduce some of that friction between those two organizations. Because I don't think you get it done just internal. I don't care what anybody says. I don't think you get it done just internal, because there's going to be a time where your team isn't going to have that expertise. Then you're going to have to go outside. And when you do, that person on the outside needs to be a trusted partner. Otherwise, you end up in this situation where there's a lot of back and forth and friction and animosity or weirdness where there doesn't need to be. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in there, and I think
I tend to do that, man. I'm sorry, I kind of So.
No, it's great, and I think I'm just trying to figure out like where, because I have a lot of questions from that. So I'd be curious to hear. I mean, you mentioned that relationship between the third party and the internal, and it being more of like a confusion between what the roles are, right? In terms of, because I've also seen like internal recruiters kind of feel like third party recruiters might be competition for their own jobs and all this type of stuff. So I'd be curious to hear from your point of view, like where did that come from and how has that developed over time? And like how is that just from multiple bad experiences or bad training or just bad, maybe on the side of agency recruiters not doing a great job in knowing their own value? And then the other thing I'd like to touch on is when you said the sourcing piece. Can you define what you mean by sourcing and like what that actually means, just for anyone who's out there?
Sure. Let me start with that because that's, to me, that's an easy one. Anytime you go out and you directly find a candidate, whether that's on LinkedIn, GitHub, I know people who have sourced candidates from Airbnb, from YouTube. You have to be creative and you have to go out there and you have to find a candidate. And to me, a direct source is where you go out, you locate a candidate, and you bring them all the way from not knowing who you are all the way through the process to where they are. That may not be a hire that you actually make, but they actually walk through that process, right? That's a time-intensive task. And it's something that we've thrown things like AIRS, right? Boolean searching, all these other things that are all valuable, but internal teams just don't have that kind of time because they have so many other constraints that they have to live up to. There are job specs and process, and this has to be moved on. And external firms work differently. We want these things to go. We want it to move, right? And we're still holding on as an external person, to go to the first part of your question. We're still holding on as an external person that what we do is worth 25, 30, 33 and a third percent like it was back in the day. But internal teams have valued that differently now. They look at it differently. Instead of giving them a reason to want to work with me, I'm making it seem like, and I'll give you this example. Internal director of talent hunts for a job for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. Can't find him. Can't find the candidate. They finally, reluctantly, reach out to a third-party agency, to a firm, and 2 days later, that person has a candidate, that agency has a candidate. You guys, as the internal team, end up hiring them, and now that team wants $30,000 for that. And to the internal eye, it looks like they worked a very short period of time, right? We've not done a good job as agencies telling people what our service is, and we've held on to this idea that our service is the same as it was 20 years ago. It's not. We're sourcing companies. And that's what I do in my private practice. I may charge less. I might charge 15, maybe 20% on a gig, but I know I'm going to have multiples of those, right? I know I'm going to have multiples of those. So I'm going to approach the way I put out candidates much differently, the way I talk about my service much differently. It's different in executive search when you jump to that. That is a very labor-intensive, retained fee upfront or partial fee upfront kind of service, and people expect to pay for that. But most companies have commoditized agencies to a point where the reason you have all of this animosity is because the agencies haven't caught up to how the internal people are thinking about them and where their real value is, and they're not selling that value back to them. Rather than saying, hey, I've got this guy, he's worth 30%. Hey, I've got thousands of people and I'm able to source them quickly. Is sourcing a problem for you? Boom. It's a whole different conversation. When my company puts in contract recruiters in places, a lot of times we'll pair them up with a sourcer, and the contract recruiter will go away, but the sourcer stays. Why? Because that internal function isn't as developed as it is in some external firms. Does that answer?
It does. It does. And I want to just get to a couple of comments here that we have. So we got privacy setting on here, and I'm not on the live, so I'm not sure exactly who this was, but it just says, thanks for the reminder on the pipeline versus Hirewerx. I needed to hear this today. No worries there. And then Robert said, today we're needing new types of teammates that simply can't have experience in education for a new ice-breaking role. I'd love to kind of get into that a little bit more. Robert, if you can elaborate. You said new types of culture, so not fully following that. Kevin just says, yes, thank you. Communication amongst the team is so key. And then having a bias for action and delivering results for customer obsession. Nicely put. Robert said, personalize, don't disguise, teach someone with passion. Experience is a plus, but I think there's a lack of passion. Invite partnership and involvement. Completely agree. And then
100%.
Lisa just says, as for searching on LinkedIn, there needs to be a better training or teaching of using keywords. I find keywords that people are searching on have nothing to do with my background. For example, people have used the term doctor, whether it's not in my background. Interesting point there. And I think, that it's that's part of sourcing, right? Is knowing,
Sure.
and that's why it's time consuming, because there's a lot of data out there. And I think it's funny because I've heard people sell on the database, right? Like, oh, we've got a great database. Data is not the issue. I mean, you don't need a database. I can go out in 10 minutes and create a database of 1,000 people
Sure.
relatively quickly. The key is finding the right people and finding that, and it's sifting through the data. So,
and it's understanding what your client's needs are, and then being able to translate that and look at profiles. Joel, I don't know if you're this way, but when I sit down and recruit, I tell my clients on the front end, I'm going to give you 2, maybe 3 people, but they're going to be dead on hits. And you're going to have an opportunity to choose from those 2 or 3. And at that point, it becomes a culture fit, right? Is this person a culture add, or are they a culture subtract? What I tell my clients all the time is, there's a few things you need to do in order to be able to attract the kind of people that you want and build high performing teams. Number one, you need to understand what your culture really is, and you have to be able to communicate it, right? Culture doesn't happen because you've got, as a good friend of mine would say, a ton of LaCroix in the kitchen. It happens based on the things.
Ping pong tables. So.
Exactly. Football, right? But culture is really about the behaviors that you reward. Right? That's really what it is. If you tell somebody my culture is this, this, and this, but you reward something totally different, you will lose that high performer because they don't feel what you told them was accurate. And secondly, when we talk to candidates, we need to be able to have a conversation with them that it goes beyond personalized. Right? When I recruit, the first thing I do I forget who you said it was, on the keywords on LinkedIn. I agree with that 100%. That's why most candidates hate talking to recruiters, because we talk to them, not everybody, but a lot of recruiters will talk to them based on a keyword that they see that really has nothing to do, it's out of context and has nothing to do with that person. But my first step in recruiting is to make connections with people that seem to fit the rec. I use some different tools that allow me to automate part of that process. And I'll go out and I'll find 100 or 150 people who I think fit with a particular rec that I'm working on. And then I'll send them connection requests, right? Because number one, LinkedIn doesn't ding me on messages. If you've got LinkedIn Recruiter and they don't respond, you get dinged on a message. Well, in this way, I'm sending a connection request. It allows me to go around that mechanism a little bit. And those people who connect with me know I'm recruiting. And they'll either say, hey, it's great to connect, I'm not looking right now, or hey, it's great to connect, I am looking right now, right? And now they're coming to me and I haven't even pitched them a job yet. And then I'll say something to them like, well, hey, why don't we get together and talk and see what it is you want to do and how you want to do it. If what I've got matches, great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. But that's that relationship. I'm not forcing them to do anything. I often say that when recruiters will tell me I'm getting horrible response rates, I'm like, it's your fault. It's your fault because your messages are crappy and you're not looking at what the person is doing or where they've been, or you're immediately asking them to take a job that they know nothing about. You're pitching this job, pitching this job, pitching this job. Imagine if you were walking down the street and somebody came up to you, Joel, with an umbrella and they said, hey, man, I've got this great umbrella. You should buy it. Well, don't you kind of turn and walk away from them? Right? Yeah. I don't know you, man. Why would I buy an umbrella from you? First of all, I don't need an umbrella right now, right? It's kind of like
100%. That. No, I really like that approach, and I think, one of the things that I think we all fall into that trap at times, and it's sure. But again, I would just drive back to, are you working in a place that celebrates short-term victories and that's it, or are you working somewhere that appreciates and wants short-term wins, because that's how you bring in revenue, but also understands the long game perspective. And I think, what happens is you have KPIs on one side. Everyone's got KPIs. So you got the internal person that has KPIs. They've got the hiring manager that's breathing down their back. Then they're communicating that with the third-party recruiter. The third-party recruiter's got the owner or the manager writing them for KPIs as well. And everybody is trying to perform. But what that can produce ultimately for the candidate is just a commoditized experience. They feel like, man, like, do you even care about me, or am I a good fit for this? And it's hard to be a trusted advisor when that's the experience that you have. So
Sure.
I love that. So I'm curious about Intalegent. I know we haven't talked about this, and it's something that you're creating a community for recruitment leaders and people who are looking to better themselves in the recruitment world. So why don't you share a little bit about that community and what you're doing? I'd love to hear about that.
Sure, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So, and by the way, I'm excited to have you as one of our contributors. I know you're a very thoughtful guy, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you're able to add. Intalegent is really a community that is designed to bring 4 particular groups together: the C-suite, HR leaders, talent leaders, and agency recruiters and leaders out there. And the reason that I want to do that is I think it takes those 4 groups to really solve the talent equation. We've seen what happens when, there's the ongoing talk about, STEM jobs and how it's hard to get people for those roles. We have groups like Girls Who Code and all of these things that are designed to engage people in technology jobs or in STEM careers. But recruiting suffers the same problems regardless of which industry you're in. It doesn't matter if you're recruiting customer service people for an insurance organization.
Oh, the sound just went out. Can you hear me okay?
I think that was me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I actually hit my cough button, I think is what happened. So where did I leave off there?
I heard, I think, like you were just talking about how the difficulty with the STEM roles and yeah.
So basically what happens is, in my opinion, is that recruiting is the same across every organization. It doesn't matter what you're recruiting. The problems and challenges that you run into are very similar. Agencies in many industries function exactly the same way, and leaders of manufacturing think about talent the same way that leaders of IT do. And sometimes that it's easier to acquire talent than it really is. Intalegent is going to be a community that's designed to have a conversation across those groups, to be able to try to actually, for once, figure out how we can all work together to address the challenges that each one of us has in recruiting. So often, HR is the redheaded stepchild of business, right? And recruiting is the redheaded stepchild of the redheaded stepchild, right? we don't get any. Nobody really thinks about us. I shouldn't say nobody really thinks about us. People hadn't really thought about us much until the last few years, as candidate preferences began to change, as the way people were going to work began to change, as the future of work was really crawling across the horizon. And what happened in 2020, and that's really the impetus behind Intalegent, is that we were all forced to work in a different way. Onboarding is different. Hiring is different. How do we do these things? How do we tackle these problems? How do we get out and talk to people about an opportunity in Chicago when they live in Omaha? And that takes agencies and good relationships all the way around. And that's the whole focus of Intalegent. So there's going to be some interesting things there. There will be a job board that will have jobs that are really highly curated in talent and in HR. And I don't want just your average everyday HR job. I'm looking for those things that are unique and interesting and where people can really make a difference. There'll also be a forum, Reddit style, without all the karma points, so you can comment and get in immediately. There will be a regular news section around business news and how that affects recruiting, talent, unemployment. There'll be some technology sections in there that allow you to get into AI and bots and things that can make your job a little bit easier. Then there are 2 other sections. One is called Voices, and those are blogs from thought leaders like Lou Adler, who you had on here, Craig Fisher, from Allegis Global, yourself. We have the head of diversity for BMO Harris Bank is one of our contributors, the former editor of rollingstone.com, and a really, really thoughtful guy who owned a branding company will be one of our contributors. And we have people who are at that level and then people who are newer in their career, because I don't think it's always guys like me who've been around for, however many years, who have the best ideas. I think you have to hear from people who are at different stages in their career. And then last but not least, there's going to be an area called visuals, and visuals are podcasts like this, lives like this, from around the world of recruiting, where people can get in and have a resource to be able to go in and go, wow, Joel covered this topic, I want to go watch this, and it's all in one place, right? And it allows people to get in and be able to access information from people who are thought leaders in the space, but also from their peers in real time through the forum if they want to do that. So we're excited. We launch March 19th, which I know it's a Friday. There's a reason for that.
As long as it's not Friday the 13th.
No, dude. I was born on Friday the 13th. It's not. No. It's not but we're launching on a Friday, Friday, March 19th. We're excited. Our job board, for those of you who maybe have HR openings out there or talent openings that you'd like to get on there, we're not charging at the beginning. I'm not looking to monetize this. This is truly an opportunity for us to have a conversation as professionals who go through the same things every day. Not a, pardon my French, not a bitch fest, but a way for us to actually sit down and solve the problem. How do we get to that place? How is it that, that some recruiters can pick up the phone and call the CEO of a company and he's not offended or she's not offended, but others can't get to that place, right? We need to train everybody. Everybody needs to be a part of solving this. And we need to understand, as externals, we need to understand the business ramifications of a hire. And as internal people, we need to understand what agencies are really good at and how we can help them mold their service to actually be the partner that we need them to be.
I love that. And I'm all about building community. That's one of the big things that I've tried to do, even just with LinkedIn. Sure. Like I look at it.
And you've done a great job too, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. And I think, there's this new app out, obviously Clubhouse, which has been getting a lot of press as well. And I think a lot of people have different views on like how they could use stuff like that. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about building those communities. It's about supporting one another. And it's really about providing spaces for people to learn and grow. And to your point, one of the interesting things that I try and coach people on, especially recruiters who are less experienced in recruitment, is the fact that there's still creativity and there's still things that they can bring to the table. So I love that you have that approach. And I think one of the things that can be really intimidating, and this is speaking from somebody who, I only started creating content 18 months ago, and I was about 5 years into my recruitment career, 10 years into my overall career. But at that point, I could have sat back and gone, you know what do I have to offer right now? But the reality is there's creativity, there's experiences that we all have. And so in these communities, for those that invest into it and those that are going to invest time, you get a lot out of it. So I love it. And I think right now, creating those spaces is just huge in general. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, like in terms of like the future of recruitment, and with all the changes that we've seen in culture as well. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot of companies invest in is, especially on the tech side. Like I just spoke to someone who's created a platform where contract recruiters can get in contact with companies, and they're making it easier, and they're creating a platform for that. What, as far as like the full desk contingent recruiter, and I know this is always controversial, but what are your thoughts with that role, and like where do you see that role coming in? Is it always going to be like that, or is technology somehow going to eclipse and kind of provide a better way to do things? I'm curious to get your take on that.
It's a really interesting question, and you will almost assuredly upset people who have been in the industry for years and years and years when you start talking about how their role is going to change. And part of it goes back to what we were talking about before. Part of the reason that I think you have this relationship between external firms and internal recruiting teams is that external firms just haven't advanced in the way that they think about providing services, in my opinion. I'm sure I'm going to upset somebody out there, but it's my opinion. I think that, you're going to see a time when external firms are going to be forced to reevaluate and retool the services that they provide. Fees have gone down and down and down. And the reason fees have gone down, with the exception of executive search, and even that has seen some that market's seen some compression, a little bit of commoditization, but not anything like what you see in direct contingent search. Fees have gone down because people value that service less. They don't need a recruiter. That whole function was there because internal people didn't have recruitment teams, and now they have them. But I like to think that the thing that internal teams do best is function as brand ambassadors. They are phenomenal at selling their own opportunity internally and building a relationship. And I would say if there's going to be a change, software will continue to reduce the amount of work that an external person does. But if you have great sourcing skills and you can build relationships and you can get your head around the idea that your fees are going to continue to come down, meaning you have to have more transactions, you have to do more work, but you can still make the same money. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not the way that most people like myself who grew up in the business think about doing it. But honestly, if I have a choice, if this is what I've done and it's what I love to do, I'm going to spend my time sourcing. I'm going to spend my time building those relationships that I can then take and market to companies or offer them a sourcing service. Hey, I'll be your outside sourcer. You've got a run that you need some time on. I can do it at an hourly or I can do it in a fee. Which would you prefer? Which suits your budget better? We have to get more and more creative externally. I don't think that the contingency recruiter role will go away in the next 10 or 12 years, but I think it's going to morph pretty dramatically. And I think those companies that will not change to meet what the market is asking you and still continue to be upset that companies only want to pay 10 or 15%, they're going to get left behind. That business is going to go away because the candidate preferences are changing and company preferences in terms of how they're attacking talent, how they're thinking about going at it, are changing pretty rapidly.
Got it. Well,
I don't know if that helps or not.
No, that helps a ton. I just always think that to me is why at the end of the day, building a brand, building a valuable brand that people see and people see value in will always, people are always willing to pay more if they see the value that you bring. So the better storyteller you are in terms of, hey, this is why you need to work with me. This is what's unique. I think it's changing that value proposition. Obviously saying you have a database, if that's what you're selling on, you can still sell on relationships because obviously relationships and data are two separate things.
Sure.
But I think you have to, when I look at someone like Lou Adler, who we mentioned earlier, the reason he's done so well is because people want to work with Lou Adler. They want to work with the brand that he's created. And so they see value in that brand. So they'll pay a premium. If you're somebody who is well known in your industry and you've been doing it for 15 and 20 years, people will still pay that premium. But you've got to think, what about somebody who's starting out right now? They've got 0 to 2 years experience. What are they selling? What value are they selling on? And how are they actually differentiating themselves? And so I love that you brought that up, and I can definitely see that happening. I want to get to a couple of these comments real quick too. Sure. So Kevin, he just says, that's why I say create content. So yeah, 100% right. And we were just talking about the connect button that you were talking about earlier as well. Carol says, Joel, thanks for hosting Ron today. Great content. Carol, always good to see you. Looking forward to having you on the show. Robert says, I feel literally that HR should be a position for the company morale back of house. Best managers for a business is the one that links everything through communication and mediation. The ambassador for people, correct. And he just said, you're exactly right. He says, just like Jesus is our ambassador, he pleads our case to God. We need to hire like Jesus. Fair point there. And people will fall in love with a multifaceted, welcome family brand. Sure. And that's an interesting point too. And I think the employer brand, if it's becoming more and more important, and I see LinkedIn has actually introduced new features on their company page, which are a lot more company centric. They're encouraging people to do stories, the behind the scenes of the company, which behind the scenes is the people. There's a lot more emphasis on employees and who are you as a company. And I like those changes, but those changes on a platform don't mean anything. It's as a company, you need to realize your brand is your people, your culture is your people. Like you said, it's what you celebrate, it's who you are. And I think brands that get a hold of that are going to do well. So Yeah.
If I could add
Of
something here
course,
real
of
quick.
course.
You were talking about brand. I think brand is super important. But I think you can spend thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars creating a brand. And yet, if you devalue the role of the recruiter, who's the first person anybody who talks to your company is going to talk to in most cases, and you haven't properly gotten them up to speed about who we are, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it, the business reason for why we do it. We send recruiters out, external and internal, on these hunts. We say, okay, we need this Ruby on Rails guy, right? But we don't tell them what the critical thing is what's not going to happen if we don't hire that person. We never have that conversation. We never arm them with that kind of urgency. We just tell them go, 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 go,
Exactly.
rather than actually making them a business partner and making sure that they understand not only what this person is going to add, but what happens if we don't get this done. Some level of focus on what they're doing. And we need to do the same thing with our external partners. We need to be able to say to them, look, if we don't get this done, here's what happens. And I'm leaning on you now. We're going to continue working, but I'm leaning on you now to help me make this happen. And then that person on the outside needs to be able to, at some point, I think one of the things outside people often get dinged for is that you need to have the integrity to say, as an outside recruiter, you know what, that's not my specialty. I can't do that. I can't help you with that. Because so often we'll take a job because we think, oh, maybe I'll luck into it, right? Maybe I'll figure it out. And that's just not what happens. Successful recruiters focus in particular areas. They're either technology or accounting or whatever. And they know everybody there is to know in those spaces. And if you're a recruiter out there taking a job outside of your specialty and you don't deliver, it's not just that you missed a fee. It's that particular company is now going to remember forever you didn't deliver. That's exactly
100%.
what they're going to think. And you have to think that way. Sometimes you're better served just walking away. So
the riches are in the niches. That's what one of my managers taught me.
I like
and
that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
And by the way, she was she specialized in roofing, like commercial roofing, and she's billing over $500,000 a year. So the riches were in the niches for her, and she's like just known in that industry. And but it's to your point, like building a brand. Like I'm all about building a brand, but it's all about executing in real life as well. So if you build a great brand, everybody knows who you are, but you can't execute, then everyone's going to know you can't execute, which is terrible.
Not executing becomes your brand, right? That becomes your brand, whether you want it to or not.
Which is that's not what you want. So, and that's why I tell people, like a lot of the recruiters who are out there who are really experienced, it's like everybody in the industry knows them, but where the branding comes in, it's top of mind. And you've got people that you've placed 10 years ago and you get in front of them and they're like, oh my gosh, what, like I got to give Ron a call. I just saw his video. And so actually you can build a powerful brand. It's particularly if you've got a powerful brand in the real world too. It's taken it online. So let's see. Scott just says you've touched on some different aspects. I really love to hear you see different in the market today compared to the pre-COVID market from the perspective of the candidate, the employer. Man, that is a whole conversation within itself. I know I usually like to keep the show to about 45 minutes, and we're coming to the end here. So Scott, I would encourage you, reach out to Ron, reach out to myself, and we can have this conversation as well. And I know Ron's going to be putting out a ton of content as well.
One thing real quick on that, if I can just
go ahead.
Throw it out there. I know you want to wrap this up, and I'm watching the clock. The biggest change will be candidates. Watch what's happening. This took what was thought of as the gig economy 2020 and accelerated it. The number of people who want to go back to offices is dwindling fast because they know they can work in this. What will be the biggest challenge is employers understanding how to give candidates flexibility to live their life and do their job. And that means flex hours in working, maybe 4-day work weeks, because productivity is up. There's a whole bunch. So Scott, if you'd like to have another discussion, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd love to. That's one of my favorite subjects to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody who's out there, reach out to Ron on LinkedIn. And this new community, which he's starting as well, and be kicking off in March. So definitely follow him, connect with him. If you've got questions, message. I know a couple of people are asking for advice for candidates as well. I know Ron puts out a ton of content as well. So reach out. Ivana, great to see you. Robert, Scott, We've got Carol, Kevin, everybody who commented. We really appreciate that. That's what makes these shows great, is the interactiveness. Ron, I like to close out the show by just sharing, like, if you were to give advice to somebody that's starting either a new agency or has started in the last year, or they're new into recruitment, what's that one tip that you would have for them to be successful in going forward in 2021 and beyond? Oh, is that me? Hold on. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I don't know what's going on over here. My advice would be a human. I had a boss once who told me, when you're a commission salesperson, which is what is the case in most of these environments, he told me to take $100 bill and put it in my wallet. And then once I had that in my wallet, no matter what happened in any transaction, I knew I had money. Whatever your mental thing is to get past the idea of thinking about fees, do that. But most importantly, be a human. Be a human to your candidates, be a human to your clients, and always try to do what's in their best interest, even if that means giving up a fee, and you'll be surprised how successful you'll be.
I love that. And as you can see, I'm the human headhunter, so I'm all about being
sorry
human.
about my sound, man. I have no idea what's going on. I don't
all
know.
Good. All good.
Now, so
that's the joy of the live show. I mean, I've had the first 2 live shows of this season, we had dogs running in the background. So,
and I bought a puppy this weekend. So,
missing out. Then we need to bring the puppy on stage.
I thought about it, but she's 8 weeks old and a wiggle worm. So,
what kind of puppy did you get?
Okay, so it's a true pure designer dog. She's a Pomsky. She's all white Pomeranian and
nice.
Husky mix with these bright blue eyes. She's just a ball of energy, man. And my fiance and I, we just love her to death. She's just great dog.
Awesome.
I'll have her on next time if we ever do this again.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say you should do a whole spotlight session for Intalegent.
Get her own Instagram and Snap.
Be the best. Exactly. Well, hey, what's the best what's the best way that people can reach you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. It's really, really easy. I think I'm the only one there. I'm with a company called Hirewerx, Hirewerx, or you can email me at ron.godier, Godier, at intalegent.com, INTALEGENT.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody who wants to connect.
Well, I will tag Ron in this post once I go back and edit it, because StreamYard doesn't allow me to tag off LinkedIn. But it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I appreciate the conversation. It always flies by super quick, too. So
I know.
I've got to figure out a way to slow down time with these, but I appreciate everybody out there as well. We will be back next Monday with another guest, so stay tuned for that. And if you guys aren't following Ron or myself on LinkedIn, do that. I'm also running daily sessions on Clubhouse too, and so you can go find me on Clubhouse, Joe Laugi. My handle is LinkedIn Legend, because if you type in LinkedIn, I'm like the 3rd person that shows up. But feel free to check that out, guys. We'll be back next time. And Ron, appreciate it again. Look forward to connecting again in the future. Take care, brother.
All right, take care now.